Good afternoon, everyone. This is A Marvelous, and I'm back. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for giving me your time and attention. As I always say, that's one thing you can't ever get back. Two things, time and attention. So thank you. I greatly appreciate it. Happy Black Panther weekend. In the spirit of Wakanda, I call this video so that the spirit of Wakanda can be upon us. Wakanda is a real thing, and I'm going to show that in this video. Anyway, thanks again. Thank you to the ancestors, known and unknown, for all that you've done and that you continue to do. If you're watching this, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, so you can get the notifications when the new things come in, new videos, things of that nature. And that's that. So with that said, the name of this one is called Wakonda ISREEL, and it is North America, USA, Black Panther, and the legend of a scattered people and its SurReality. So, this isn't really a breakdown of the Black Panther. This is more so a focus on Wakanda and that it's real, and I'm going to show that in this video beyond a reasonable doubt. But in doing that, I'm going to actually reference, of course, Black Panther. So if you haven't seen it, won't be too many spoilers, but I think it's important because this movie overall was basically one long dialogue of the history, past, present, and future of black people's condition. So, and Wakanda is the stage for that. And of course, it's thought that Wakanda is this fictional place that doesn't exist, that's not real, but it actually is real. So with that, I want to say I was up late night, as I always am, studying and things of that nature. And I came across something in this book that I suggest if you're into your spiritual practices on a non-traditional level, you pick up. It's called the Dictionary of Ancient Deities. So, in flipping through this, I was like, something said, let me see if Wakanda's in here. So, as I look, Wakanda is in here. I don't know if you can see it. Probably not, but it's in here. And I was like, oh, word, it is in here. And it says Wakanda, parentheses, the Osage, Omaha Sioux, and Dakota Indian, North America. Then it goes to proceed what Wakanda is. Wakanda is the power above, a supreme invisible being who created everything. Among the Nebraska Omaha people, Wakanda stands for the mysterious life power embodied in all natural forces and creatures, as well as in man. Compared to Tarawa of the Pawnee Indians, see also Kichi Manitou. So when I seen that, I said, oh snap, Wakanda is not just a fictional thing. I said, at least in spirit, it's real. So basically, Wakanda is that same energy or force that we would attribute the same God force if you were to believe it in another religion. Except they didn't call it Wakanda, they called it, the Holy Spirit. So this Holy Spirit, to these native tribes indigenous to North America, I mentioned those particular tribes, but I'm going to show that the whole North America is Wakanda, spiritually and physically. Is that Holy Spirit that all plants, all human beings, that touches everything, that everything possesses, is called Wakanda, right? The life force that's in us was known, according to the indigenous individuals in North America, as Wakanda. So as I seen that, I said, okay, there's a spiritual play going on here, and black people are connected to that because the original indigenous Indians, of course, were these Africans, these black individuals. So as I'm looking and doing more research, I noticed that there's actually physical places in North America with the name Wakanda, and it was all linked to these different Indian tribes, should I say, indigenous, African, in American tribes. And I said, oh snap. So I said, Wakanda is not Africa, it's North America, the United States. So in watching the Black Panther, you'll notice that one of the major dialogues was its relationship between the Africans and Wakanda, right? And their relationship to the rest of the world, primarily their relationship with other black people around the planet. So, based on the spirit definition of Wakanda, Wakanda is everywhere on planet Earth. Period. It's that Holy Spirit of the creative force that touches everything. It's called Wakanda. So Wakanda is planetary. That's from Africa to here, everywhere. However, the actual name and the actual people that called it Wakanda and that actually established places in the name of Wakanda was here in North America. And I took a list of places in North America with these indigenous tribes with the name Wakanda, and the list was on and on. So I'm going to read a few so you can see that in the movie Black Panther, right, they took place in Africa. But really, that's a story of black people in general and its relationship as they are scattered across planet Earth. Being that Africa is the birthplace of human beings, it just makes sense in the fictional realm that Wakanda would take place to represent melanated people's glory, just like Egypt. But because America is so based on trauma, right, and its education system and its political system is based on keeping people traumatized, especially black people, we don't get educated on melanin black history in this country outside of it being connected to slavery, because all black people in this country did not come from slaves. All of us are descendants from Africa, but all of us did not get here in America through slaves or slave ships. There were some of us that was already here, and it had nothing to do with them being slaves. But we don't hear about the details of that relationship in the school system because that's too empowering. And that, if you watch Black Panther, you will see how that plays out in the movie. And after this video, you'll also see how that plays out in everyday life, because most black people will hear this and say, oh, America's not Wakanda. There's no area where black people had all of this greatness, but that's not true. If you look across America historically, especially, you'll see traces of greatness, and you'll see it when you see mounds. In South America, you'll see it with the pyramids. So black people did have a Wakanda outside of Africa, and it was great. It was highly technological. The difference is Europeans came in, and then the trauma hit, and then in that trauma, it created a veil, and that veil was responsible for us not connecting to our past and seeing that we was great. And then a new present in our past was formed, and it was connected to slave ships in Africa being brought here. That veil severed the ties of the original Wakanda and its technological greatness, and it was replaced by a traumatic, slave-orientated, docile, controlled, subhuman history of blacks in America. So that's why outside of Africa, and in any context, whether it's fantasy or reality, it's hard for us to see that a Wakanda actually existed for blacks, for Africans in America, to have existed. So until we link that past, presently, it's going to be hard to see. So first, I have to establish that there is a spiritual concept of Wakanda that actually existed, because Hollywood is no longer just a matter of it being fantasy. See, in 2018, since everything is quickening, what we think is fantasy is close to real, and what we see is real nonsense that we're seeing is really fantasy. So those lines are blurred. So anything you see on that movie screen is a higher, probably the highest reflection of reality in this day and time than ever before since Hollywood's creation. So with that, I'm going to read the different places in America that actually have physical geography in North America, in the United States, with the name Wakanda. We have Wakanda Springs, which is the Great Spirit Spring in Kansas. We have Wakonda, Oregon. We have the Wakonda Station, which was connected to the Oregon Electric Railway. We have Wakonda Lake in Mitchell and Osborne County in Kansas. We have Wakonda, South Dakota. We have Wakonda Drive in Iowa. We have Wakonda, Illinois. We have Wakonda State Park in Missouri. We have Wakonda Beach State Airport in Oregon. So Those are just to name a few. So Wakanda is North America, primarily those places in Middle America where these indigenous Africans historically have been here residing outside of being brought here from Africa by slave ships. And these indigenous individuals are not the Native Americans or Indians that you see with the high Caucasian features and white skin. If you read books such as this, and I'm going to give some references, African Presence in Early America by Ivor Van Sertima, same author, they came before Columbus. There's another book called The First Americans Were Africans. You will see that the concept of the Indians or the Native Americans that we see with these Caucasian features were not the indigenous so-called Indians, so-called Native Americans, the indigenous inhabitants here before Europeans did not look like that. They were as dark as me, if not darker. Some of them were 7 foot tall, built, muscular. They were here forever, okay? But we don't know that because the school system doesn't teach that. The Wakanda that really exists was blocked out of history and repackaged to us through Marvel Comics thousands of miles away in Africa to give us a sense of hope through the eyes of Jews and Caucasians. Even though it was an excellent movie, we have to know that Wakanda is everywhere spiritually, and Wakanda in its history is North America. And the relationship between North America and Africa is a central theme in the movie Black Panther. And one of the chief natives of North America that established these Wakanda points in North America were the Omaha Indians, right? Were the Osage Nation, Osage Indians, the Pawnee, the Omaha, the Osage, the Kaw, right? The Kaw Nation, which is the Kansas, which is where they named Kansas after, and Topeka. All of that comes from these indigenous individuals. The Dakotas, the Lanza, also pick up a book called the Walam Olam, or the Red Report, which gives a history of the Delaware. Well, they were named the Delaware people, and you could see that these individuals were here for generations, and it chronicles their history in this country for generations. So if you look at the history of these natives in this country, you will see that they span at least 7 to 10 states easily, establishing all types of civilizations. And I covered this too in the Donald Trump video I did, saying that his capital for his America is not Washington, D.C., it's Phoenix. And even in Phoenix, Arizona, you have indigenous people called the Hohokam. The Hohokam people, which had great irrigation systems, established in Arizona and Phoenix in that part of America. So we have a Wakanda and it's here. But the reason why it's blocked and that we can't see it is because that trauma was introduced through slavery and it severed the ties of our greatness. So we can't see a Wakanda in this country like we can in the movie. So I think that's very interesting to see. If you understand that Wakanda is not something that's representative of just Africa, it's represented here, you'll start to see, like in the movie, where the dialogue and the debate was on whether or not the Wakandans in the movie should help other blacks here, right? Because if there was already greatness in other parts of the country, they really didn't need the help of the Africans, right? So if they already had this greatness in other parts of the world, especially North America, how come it fell? So that's interesting. So I wanted to point that out. So when seeing that Wakanda is an American thing, a North American thing, I'd have to ask myself then, well, first it shows that Hollywood, we can't look at it as fantasy anymore, period. Whether it's a cartoon, we have to get rid of that. That's why I said is real, because what you see now on TV is no longer just a matter of it being fiction. Everything you see on screen now is a play of what's going on in reality, period. It's almost in real time and it almost matches to the point to where the things that you encounter firsthand with your senses are more unbelievable than what you see in that screen. And you'll see that if you see Black Panther, You have more things that you can identify with than you probably can if you're around some of your friends or some of your family, right? So that's why I wanted to do this video, to show that what we're seeing is not something that's just made up. It's not. It's something that already exists. Almost all the movies that you see really already exist. It's just that nobody has presented it in this package form to where we can see it in a collective fashion and partake in the same experience, so we could digest what we already know or feel to be real, but it has not been represented to us outside of us in a fashion where other people can see the exact same thing and go through it differently. And that's what movies represent. It represents something that everyone can see the same thing and participate in, but can come out with a different interpretation of it and not feel that they're crazy for feeling it. That's what movies represent. If these movies and TV shows didn't come out, you might have still felt it or seen it, but other people might not have felt it or seen it. And if you try to explain it to them, you might seem a little off. But if it's put in movie form, now everyone has the same frame of reference, right? But everyone just has a different interpretation, and no one comes out feeling like they're crazy because they all seen the exact same thing. They just interpret it different. So in reality, when you say to somebody that Wakanda is real, it no longer sounds crazy. And you could tell the establishment of the greatness in this country, because wherever these natives existed, they left trails of their greatness. That's what mounds represent. Anytime you see mounds in this country, that's a sign of a great civilization similar to Wakanda. Now, I want to go back to the movie for a little bit, because in establishing that the Wakanda is real in its spirit and in its geography, which is in this country, another thing that I noticed, that's also has become real in a sense, in the movie they mentioned the material vibranium. Now, I think this is important because if you look at the Marvel history of vibranium and you look at the story of black people in Black Panther, it's interesting to note that this this element, vibranium, in Marvel history was not native to Africa. It wasn't, which I thought was very, very deep. If you look at the history of Marvel Comics, the original vibranium was in what was called the Savage Land. It wasn't in a civilized nation. Wakanda, which was highly civilized, had a different form of vibranium, but the very first appearance of vibranium and the very first region where vibranium existed was not in civilized Africa. It was in the Savage Land, right, in Antarctica. And the savage people were the ones that had privy to it. And the savage people were these man apes. And one of those people were called Khazar. So if you look at Marvel Comics, there's a character called Khazar. Why is this relevant? If you know anything about the Khazars or the Khazarians, you know that those are the Jews. Not the original Jews, but the individuals now calling themselves Jews. So when I seen that, I said, wow, this is a backdrop of something that's hovering in the storyline of Black Panther and vibranium. It's told that vibranium was something that was indigenous to this black country in Africa, Wakanda, that made it great, and that no part of the world had it. And this is one of the things that separated them. And when you see this, this is what elevates black people in your mind, because you're seeing this movie and black people in such a great light. That's why the movie was good, that you walk away feeling like, damn, you know, there's no negative images about black people in this movie. So when you look at the Marvel Comics and you realize that this substance was something that wasn't indigenous to a civilized nation, it was something that was indigenous to a savage area, it makes you think, oh, okay, I see what's going on. So they're telling you that this high level vibration, this high level element is something that was indigenous in a place called the Savage Land, where the original individuals was the Khazars. And the Khazars are the Jews, and they were white. So when you see that, the storyline is really telling you that this high level substance wasn't something that was indigenous to people of color or melanated people, but it was indigenous to people without color, which was white people, in a place called the Savage Land, with one of its inhabitants being Khazar. That's very subtle. Even though they didn't touch on that in the movie, in the actual comics, that's the real story about it. Now that's relevant because in the Marvel's created by Jews, first of all. So the fact that they're telling you that this same substance that's making black people great is originally in a place called the Savage Land, which was inhabited by people of white color. It's really telling you that in the comics, the real power lies not in Africa where black people, but where white people are in this place called the Savage Land. That's in the backdrop. However, that wasn't in the movie, so taking the movie for what it was excellent. But looking at the movie and its dialogue, it's showing the disconnect between people that consider themselves, well, you could be in America and not consider yourself African, but people with melanin that's dark, there's a disconnect there because Africans, if you look at the movie, it'll see that they felt a duty more to their homeland than to the rest of the planet of people that look just like them that were suffering. Then you have black people outside of Wakanda or outside of Africa where they felt they don't feel any kind of love from people from their homeland because they're going through all of this called oppression, and they didn't get any assistance from them to back down the oppressor. So that movie was a dialogue. But if you look at the nature and the origin of Wakanda being in America, you will understand that in actuality, we didn't really need the help of Africans. Period. Because Wakanda was already here. There was already greatness here. There was already great civilizations of these Africans in America with high technological advancement and knowledge to where we didn't need it. Period. So we didn't really need the help of Africans because we already had it here. The problem was abandoning what we knew and trusting the Europeans, and they come in, and it took away from the indigenous individuals' ways of life. So as long as black people outside of Africa are disconnected from their history and their knowledge, and they can't see Wakanda is everything, and they can't see that the original Wakanda is where they were born, here in the United States, then they're always going to play a victim. They're always going to expect help. When you call on outside forces, when you always looking for other people to help you out and not realizing that the power is all around you, then you're never going to rise up and get to the position of where you were, if not greater. And that's what Wakanda represents. Wakanda represents that force that always was, that is, that will be, and using that force to build a high civilization where you stand. That's what Wakanda is. And that's what Black Panther, the movie, attempted to flush out, was that connection. The connection isn't necessarily that you're black in Africa, we're black in America, you're black everywhere else around the planet. The connection was Wakanda is the spirit that exists everywhere. And once you understand that that spirit, as you see in this book, is something that's in all things, plants, animals, humans. Once you understand that, then you understand that the power is in you and the power is around you. That's step one. That's Wakanda, is recognizing that the power of your freedom is something that exists just by the sheer fact of you being you. Period. That's Wakanda right there. Second is taking that spirit, that energy of what's all around you and creating something in your space that you can stand on that represents the higher part of you. That's also Wakanda. And that's what the indigenous people here did with the native tribes. They was already in this region, and they had, just like in South America, pyramids, and they built these civilizations and these trade routes and all that, and they established great nations where they stood. And that's what North America represents. The reason why Wakanda not only established as geographical places here in North America, and not only established in the spirit realm, but the reason why North America has to be the real Wakanda, more so than Africa, even though the Africa Wakanda is fictional, the North American one is real. But the reason why it has to be here is because North America represents the place on the planet where Africans, whether they came here from Africa on slave ships or they came here through their travels without slave ships, it is the North American, or the Africa in the West, black people, historically, presently, and in the future, that represents the new black man and black woman, period. For no other reason that the amount of trauma that was experienced by people with melanin that look like this, that's dark, was experienced the most harshly here than anywhere else on planet Earth. And that's why the concept of Wakanda resonates so much with people in this country, is because we represent the real Wakanda, and we represent the civilization that's going to come, that's going to mirror what we see in the movie. And that's the real spirit of Black Panther. Black Panther, on a whole bunch of levels, represents the North American black person's ability to get past their trauma, get to their history, pull out their history, not just their African history, but their North American history, pull that out and regain their power on this land that we call the United States of America. Just like Donald Trump, his real capital is Phoenix, because Phoenix represents in its name a city that once was great that will rise again and become greater. That's something that came from the Hohokam people. That's why they called it Phoenix. Blacks here have to do the same thing in the spirit of Wakanda. The spirit of Wakanda is the North American black man's ability to take the glory from their past, not just live in the fantasy world of African past like Egypt, like we always do. We were great kings in Egypt. We were great here. We were great all around the world. South America, Asia, Europe, everywhere. But the difference is, because of how we're taught and because of our trauma, our genetic scars and imprints, we still have not found the ability to look past Africa and look to North America, which represents ourselves, and find the glory that we had here independent of slavery. Once we're able to do that, all of the stuff that we seen in that movie will be achieved and then some. And that's what Black Panther represented. It wasn't a story of Africa. It was a story of North America and the black people in North America, and our ability to raise ourselves up past the trauma in the spirit of Wakanda, which is something that is real, as you've seen, to take that spirit and build these civilizations despite the trauma and despite the abuse that we take, without looking for handouts and without being victims. So that is why I decided to do this video, because when I found out that Wakanda is not something that is fantasy, it's something that's real, I said, wow. I said, this movie is right on time. But the movie didn't mention Wakanda was here, but if you look at the dialogue, and if you really, I only seen the movie once, I'm gonna see it again, but what jumps out at you is this constant interplay between the two regions, right? So maybe this movie could be a good marker for blacks in North America, in the United States, to represent where we stand and nowhere else. What is the history of North America? All these places are named Wakanda. Kansas, Oregon, Illinois, Iowa, South Dakota, Missouri, Nebraska, Minnesota, all got Wakanda in it. All of them. They all got Wakanda in it. So if that's the case, and it's the spirit that's around us, can we get past the trauma and the connection to slavery and how we was always in a lower type of human condition, to get past that and to reclaim the greatness that these native tribes have accomplished and the records that they have accomplished, to re-establish something even greater and to bring back our history as a people. So other people outside of North America can look at us and say, wow, look at the great achievements that they did. Look at the greatness that they accomplished. And they didn't even ask for handouts. They took the spirit of Wakanda, which is that spirit, that God force that's all around us and in us, and they transformed themselves into a great civilization that everyone can respect. Once that happens, you'll see a seemingly change overnight. And that's the beauty of that movie, is that it represented that dialogue. But that dialogue was really a dialogue that's inside us. That's inside us. Can we sever the connection that we have with constantly associating ourselves with the positives and negatives of Africa? Because if you're an American, a black American, and you talk to people in Africa or people from the Caribbean, there's a tension there, right? To the point to where some of them don't even claim us as Africans or as Caribbean. You have some great people, like a Marcus Garvey, that shattered all that and said that we're one people. But in the masses, you still have that friction. And I could see the friction, and that movie clearly shines light on that friction. And I think a big reason as to why that is because black Americans, blacks in North America, in the United States, have not established a great society above our trauma. We've shown that we can fight back against the individuals that cause our trauma, but we have not shown that not only can we fight back, but we can actually create greatness and rise above our trauma. Instead, we've created things because of our trauma, but we haven't created things above our trauma. Hip hop is because of our trauma, but what have we created above our trauma? See, there's a difference when trauma forces you to produce something to release pain. That's hip hop. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a difference when trauma through poverty forces you to channel your energy through something like dribbling the basketball or throwing the football. That's not what I'm talking about. There's a difference in creating a new scientific theory, right? Or something of that nature, where it has nothing to do with your poverty. It has nothing to do with you being hit and killed by police. It has something to do with your mind state, your mental acumen, and your ability to manifest greatness outside of being abused. That's when you really use Wakanda. Other than that, you're using a slave-based, trauma-based reaction towards you being great on a lower level because you've been kicked, as opposed to severing the ties of your trauma after you've seen it, worked through it, and created something that's higher than your trauma, and not an outlet to release pain before you self-destruct. That's the point of where we need to be. And anytime that's done, you will see the Black Panther rise in each black person. That's all it is. And that's what North America represents. Until the blacks in North America really understand that they have to create above their trauma, all is lost. And that's what Wakanda represents. The ability for blacks in North America to rise above their trauma, reclaim their history outside of slavery and outside of African slave ships, and shine light on the history that we had in this country. And until we do that, it's not going to work. And that's what the movie Black Panther represented. But that's also what it didn't touch on, was that Wakanda is not in Africa. Wakanda is in the United States. So with that, thank you for your attention. I greatly appreciate it. Kept this one a little short. And in the spirit of Wakanda, I no longer will call this place America for the most part. This is Wakanda. There's geographical regions called Wakanda. And it's time to start actually making this the real Wakanda like our ancestors did. Peace.